Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning, flip the light switch, and nothing happens. You check your phone, dead. Your neighbor's house is dark too. In fact, the entire city has gone black. This isn't just a temporary outage. This is the beginning of a complete grid collapse that will separate the 95% who panic from the 5% who thrive. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why most people are completely unprepared for even a basic power outage. Reveal the terrifying cascade of events that happen when the lights go out for more than just a few hours, and most importantly, give you the exact framework the prepared minority uses to not just survive, but maintain their sanity and security when everyone else is losing theirs. Welcome to Crisis Horizon, where we turn uncertainty into preparedness and fear into confidence. If you're ready to join the small percentage of people who won't be caught off guard when disaster strikes, smash that like button and subscribe for more reality-based survival content that could literally save your life. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're completely dependent on an invisible network that most people never think about. Every time you flip a switch, charge your phone, or open your refrigerator, you're relying on a massive, interconnected system of power plants, transformers, and thousands of miles of power lines. This system is so integrated into our daily lives that we've forgotten what life was like without it. But here's what the 95% don't realize. This system is far more fragile than you think. Behind every byte of data, every illuminated screen, and every hum of an appliance, there's physical hardware. Cell phone towers, ATMs, computer servers, transformers, and that vast network of power lines crisscrossing our nation. Each of these components can fail from hackers, neglect, age, or deliberate attack. And when they do, the consequences range from minor inconveniences to society-altering catastrophes. Most people have experienced a brief power outage, maybe a few hours, perhaps a day. These are usually nothing more than minor annoyances. You dig out some flashlights, maybe light a few candles, and wait it out. But what if it doesn't come back on? What if one day becomes 3 days, then a week, then a month? Let me break down exactly what happens when the power goes out and stays out. Because understanding this timeline is the difference between being part of the prepared 5% and the panicking 95%. When we talk about power outages, not all failures are created equal. There are neighborhood blackouts that affect a few blocks, citywide outages that impact hundreds of thousands, regional failures that can affect millions across multiple states, and then there's the big one, a nationwide or even global grid failure that fundamentally disrupts civilization itself. This isn't just about a news story. This is about understanding the consequences of power failure. For a neighborhood outage, you might be inconvenienced for a few hours or even a day. But help is coming. The power company knows about it, crews are working on it, and life goes on. These are the outages most people prepare for if they prepare at all. But when we start talking about citywide outages, things change dramatically. Now we're looking at hundreds of thousands or millions of people affected simultaneously. Outside help becomes limited because everyone needs the same resources at the same time. This is where you start seeing the first signs of social strain. Regional outages are where things get serious. The United States power grid is divided into 3 main interconnected systems plus Alaska. When an entire region goes down, we're talking about tens of millions of people without power, and the resources to fix it are suddenly spread extremely thin. This is no longer about waiting for the power company. This is about survival. And then there's the nightmare scenario, a nationwide or even global grid failure. Whether it's from a massive cyber attack, solar flare, or coordinated physical assault on infrastructure, this level of failure doesn't just inconvenience people, it fundamentally alters society. This is what separates those who understand real preparedness from those who think keeping a few flashlights in a drawer is enough. Now, skeptics will say that preparing for long-term, widespread outages is unnecessary paranoia. After all, the odds of a nationwide grid failure are relatively low. But here's the thing. We carry insurance on our homes and cars not because we expect disaster, but because we want protection if it strikes. Preparedness isn't about paranoia, it's about prudence. And when you understand what actually happens when the power stays off, you'll realize why 95% of people are setting themselves up for panic and disaster. Let me walk you through the timeline of collapse, because this is where most people's understanding completely breaks down. They think a power outage just means no lights and no TV. They have no idea about the cascading failures that make an extended grid failure a true civilization-threatening event. In the first day or two of an outage, most people can cope. It's inconvenient, sure, but manageable. You've got some food in the pantry, maybe some bottled water, and you can get by. If it's localized, outside help is available. Stores might still be open, running on generators. Gas stations might still be pumping fuel. Life is disrupted, but it's not catastrophic. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people's emergency preparedness is designed for exactly this scenario, a day or two without power. They've got some flashlights, maybe some batteries, perhaps a small stash of canned goods. What they don't realize is that they're preparing for the least dangerous scenario while remaining completely vulnerable to anything more serious. Once we hit day 3 and beyond, everything changes. What started as any.
And if the outage is regional or national in scope, that's when the true cascading failures begin. First, let's talk about water. Most people assume that if the power goes out, water will still flow from their taps. But municipal water systems rely on electric pumps. Most have backup generators, but those generators need fuel, and fuel delivery requires functional supply chains. After a few days, even these backup systems start failing. No water means no sanitation, no drinking water, and no fire protection. Then there's food distribution. Modern grocery stores operate on just-in-time inventory systems. They receive daily deliveries and keep minimal stock on hand. When the power goes out, these deliveries stop. The food in the store spoils without refrigeration, and even if there's food available, without power, the cash registers don't work and the card readers are dead. You better hope you have cash, and you better hope the store is even willing to open. But it gets worse. Gas stations can't pump fuel without electricity. Even if they have backup generators, those generators need fuel too, and the refineries and distribution networks are also affected by the power outage. No fuel means no transportation, which means no deliveries, no emergency services, and no way for people to leave affected areas. Now let's talk about communication. Your cell phone might have some battery life left, but cell towers also need power. Most have backup batteries that last 24 to 72 hours, but after that, they go dark. No cell service means no ability to call for help, no way to coordinate with family members, and no access to information about what's happening or when power might be restored. Medical services begin to collapse. Hospitals have backup generators, but those generators typically have fuel for about 1 week of operation. Patients on life support, people who need regular dialysis, those requiring refrigerated medications, they're all in immediate danger once those generators fail. And ambulances can't respond to calls if they can't fuel up. Law enforcement and emergency services become overwhelmed. Police departments that might normally handle a few dozen calls per day are suddenly dealing with thousands of emergency situations simultaneously. They can't respond to everything, and they have to prioritize. Property crimes, domestic disturbances, and civil unrest all spike during extended outages. But there aren't enough officers to maintain order. This is where we hit what experts call the tipping point, usually around day 4 to 7. Crime rates begin to rise as desperation sets in. People who never thought they'd steal anything are now breaking into stores for food and water. Social order starts to break down, and that's when you realize that all those disaster movies weren't really exaggerating. By the 2-week mark, if we're dealing with a regional or national outage, we're no longer talking about an emergency. We're talking about societal collapse. At this point, even the most robust backup systems are failing. Nuclear power plants have backup systems designed to last about a week. After that, even these critical safety systems are at risk. Government resources are completely overwhelmed. FEMA and other emergency agencies are designed to handle localized disasters, where they can bring in resources from unaffected areas. But in a widespread, long-term outage, there are no unaffected areas to draw resources from. Everyone needs the same help simultaneously, and there simply isn't enough to go around. This is when martial law becomes almost inevitable. When you can't maintain order through normal means, governments resort to extraordinary measures. We saw hints of this during Hurricane Katrina, where authorities suspended civil liberties and even confiscated legally owned firearms. In a nationwide grid failure lasting weeks or months, these measures would be far more extensive and long-lasting. But here's what really separates the prepared 5% from everyone else. They understand beyond the 2-week mark, you're not dealing with an emergency anymore. You're dealing with a new reality. At this point, the skills and knowledge that sustained humanity for thousands of years before electricity, growing food, purifying water, basic mechanical repair, community organization, become more valuable than any college degree or professional certification. Groups begin to form, both good and bad. Some people band together for mutual support and protection. Others form predatory gangs that prey on the weak and unprepared. Those who have prepared supplies and developed skills become valuable community members. Those who haven't become either burdens or victims. This is the harsh reality that 95% of people refuse to consider. In a truly extended grid failure, there will be what experts grimly call a die-off. Not everyone will survive the transition from our modern electricity-dependent society to a more basic existence. The question is, will you be among the survivors? Now, I'm not trying to scare you into panic. I'm trying to help you understand why real preparedness is so much more than just keeping some flashlights and batteries around. The people who survive extended grid failures are those who understand the full scope of what they're preparing for and take comprehensive action before disaster strikes. So let's talk about how to be part of that prepared 5%. This isn't about becoming a doomsday prepper or living in a bunker. This is about building practical resilience that will serve you whether you face a 3-day neighborhood outage or a 3-month regional collapse. For short-term outages, those lasting up to about a week, your preparations are relatively straightforward. You need reliable light sources, so invest in quality flashlights and LED lanterns, plus plenty of batteries. But don't forget about power banks for your devices.
Communication becomes critical during emergencies, and a charged phone might be your lifeline to important information or emergency services. Food and water are obvious priorities. For short-term scenarios, you need at least 3 days' worth of non-perishable food and clean water. That's 1 gallon per person per day for drinking, cooking, and basic sanitation. But here's what most people miss. You need food you actually know how to prepare without electricity. Having a bunch of frozen meals doesn't help if your power's been out for 3 days. Keep cash on hand because ATMs don't work without power, and many businesses can only accept cash during outages. A basic first aid kit is essential because emergency services may be overwhelmed or unable to reach you quickly. These supplies aren't just for grid failures, they're useful for any emergency, from severe storms to economic disruptions. This level of preparation puts you ahead of about 60% of the population, but it's still not enough for extended outages. As we move into intermediate preparedness, planning for outages lasting 1 to 4 weeks, the requirements become more sophisticated. Now you need larger food and water stores, ideally enough for at least 2 weeks per person in your household. You need alternative cooking methods because your electric stove and microwave are useless. Propane camping stoves, charcoal grills, or even safe indoor fireplaces become essential. Home security takes on greater importance as law enforcement becomes stretched thin. This doesn't necessarily mean firearms, though they may be part of your security plan depending on your local laws and personal preferences, but it definitely means reinforcing doors and windows, improving lighting around your property, and developing situational awareness. Fuel storage becomes critical, but you need to do this safely and legally. Gasoline has a limited shelf life and proper storage requirements. Propane is often a better choice for cooking and heating because it stores indefinitely and burns cleanly. Communication equipment like battery-powered or hand-crank radios can provide vital information when other systems fail. During the 2003 Northeast blackout, radio was often the only source of information about what was happening and when power might be restored. This is also when community building becomes essential. No one survives extended emergencies alone. Start building relationships with neighbors and like-minded individuals now before you need them. Share knowledge, pool resources, and develop mutual aid agreements. In uncertain times, community becomes your greatest asset. For long-term preparedness, planning for outages lasting a month or more, you need to make a fundamental mindset shift. You're no longer preparing to wait out an emergency, you're preparing to adapt to a new way of living, at least temporarily. Sustainable food sources become critical. This means learning to garden, understanding basic food preservation techniques, and possibly even small-scale animal husbandry if your situation permits. You can't store enough food to last indefinitely, so you need ways to produce more. Water purification becomes a survival skill, not just a convenience. You need to know how to collect water from natural sources and make it safe to drink. This means understanding filtration, boiling, and chemical treatment methods. Renewable energy systems can provide limited but vital electricity for essential devices. You don't need to power your entire home like normal, but being able to charge communication devices, run some lights, or operate small appliances can make an enormous difference in your quality of life and safety. Medical knowledge becomes invaluable when professional healthcare is unavailable or overwhelmed. Basic first aid is just the starting point. Understanding how to treat common injuries, illnesses, and infections could literally save lives. But perhaps most importantly, you need to develop the right mindset. Long-term preparedness isn't about accumulating stuff. It's about building capabilities. Skills can't be stolen or destroyed. Knowledge doesn't have an expiration date. The more self-sufficient you become, the less you depend on fragile systems. This is where psychology becomes crucial. One of the biggest obstacles to preparedness is simple complacency. Most people suffer from what psychologists call normalcy bias, the tendency to assume that things will continue as they always have. They think the power has always come back on before, so it always will. But history is full of societies that were unprepared for disaster. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan showed how quickly modern infrastructure can fail. Hurricane Katrina demonstrated how quickly social order can break down. The 2021 Texas winter storm revealed how vulnerable our power grid really is, even in short-term scenarios. There's also social stigma around preparedness. Preppers are often portrayed as paranoid extremists. But in reality, the people who prepare quietly and rationally are the ones who don't contribute to panic buying and supply shortages when emergencies actually occur. They're also less likely to need rescue or assistance, reducing the burden on emergency services. Think of preparedness as insurance. You hope you'll never need it, but if disaster strikes, you'll be grateful you invested the time and resources. And even if the worst-case scenarios never happen, many preparedness measures offer everyday benefits. Solar panels reduce your electric bill. A well-stocked pantry saves trips to the grocery store. Water filtration systems provide better-tasting drinking water. Let's get practical about building your preparedness step by step. For food security, focus on foods you already eat and know how to prepare. There's no point in stockpiling exotic survival foods that you've never tasted and don't know how to cook.
Rotate your supplies regularly. Use older items and replace them with fresh stock to avoid waste. If possible, start growing some of your own food, even if it's just herbs on a windowsill or tomatoes in pots on a balcony. Gardening skills take time to develop, and it's better to learn when your life doesn't depend on it. For water management, store at least 1 gallon per person per day, but more is better if you have space. Learn multiple purification methods: filtration, boiling, and chemical treatments like bleach or water purification tablets. If it's legal in your area, consider rainwater collection systems. For power and lighting, invest in quality equipment that will last. LED lanterns and headlamps use less power and last longer than traditional flashlights. Solar-powered chargers can keep small devices running indefinitely. If you can afford it, a backup generator and fuel storage can power essential appliances, but remember that generators require maintenance and fuel. Keep manual tools for essential tasks. Hand crank can openers, manual water pumps, and non-electric tools ensure you can accomplish necessary tasks even without power. For communication, battery-powered or hand crank radios are essential for receiving emergency information. Establish communication plans with family members and neighbors. Decide in advance how you'll find each other and share information if normal communication systems fail. Security preparation depends greatly on your local laws and personal situation, but at minimum, reinforce your doors and windows, improve exterior lighting, and develop situational awareness. Stay alert to changes in your neighborhood and community. Remember, no amount of preparation guarantees survival. Flexibility and adaptability are just as important as any stockpile. The goal isn't to have everything you might possibly need, it's to build the skills and resources that give you the best chance of successfully adapting to whatever challenges you face. Building community relationships is perhaps the most important aspect of preparedness that people overlook. In any extended emergency, isolated individuals are vulnerable individuals, but people who are part of strong, organized communities have support systems that can make the difference between thriving and merely surviving. Start building these relationships now. Get to know your neighbors. Join or create community groups focused on emergency preparedness, gardening, or other practical skills. Share knowledge and resources. When disaster strikes, these relationships will be invaluable. Consider this: would you rather face an extended power outage as an isolated individual with a stockpile of supplies, or as part of a community where everyone contributes different skills and resources? The community approach is not only more effective, it's also more sustainable and mentally healthier. The reality is that most of us will never face a nationwide or global grid failure. The vast majority of power outages will be short-lived and manageable with basic preparations. But by preparing for the full spectrum of possibilities, we not only protect ourselves from potential disaster, we also enrich our daily lives with greater self-sufficiency and stronger community connections. Preparedness is a journey, not a destination. You don't need to do everything at once. Start with the basics and build your capabilities over time. Focus on developing skills alongside accumulating supplies. Most importantly, maintain maintain the right mindset. Preparedness isn't about living in fear. It's about cultivating confidence and resilience. Every step you take toward greater self-sufficiency and community resilience makes you less dependent on fragile systems and more capable of handling whatever challenges life throws your way. Whether that's a 3-hour neighborhood blackout or a 3-month regional grid failure, you will be ready. The choice is yours. Remain part of the 95% who will panic when the lights go out, or join the 5% who have prepared themselves to not just survive, but to help rebuild and strengthen their communities. The time to make that choice is now, while the power is still on and the stores are still stocked. Start today. Your future self will thank you.